Welcome to DataVids. I'm going to show you today how we can build an MVC application to upload a video file, convert it to the format you want, create a thumbnail from it, and save both the video file and the thumbnail to a hard disk. What this video will not cover is any special security on form uploads. You'll have to look for additional videos or other tutorials to see that. And it doesn't show how to upload videos to blob storage. I have another video I recently put out on that you could take a look at. It's just a real simple video, and I've already written the program. I'll provide you a link to the code if you want the code at the end of the video. Right now I'm just going to walk you through how it's put together. That way if you do go out to GitHub and get the source code, maybe you'll know a little bit more about how it works and why it's built this way. So the first thing I want you to do is create a new MVC application, and then you're going to go and get some NuGet packages. So go to Manage NuGet Packages for Solution. As you can see, there's 3 that I've installed here. The first one is FFMPEG Core. This is an open source library that's going to help you consume the FFmpeg application. If you don't already have FFmpeg, you need to go and download that first. What FFmpeg is it is a class library to manipulate images and video. There are some licensing restrictions around the FFmpeg software itself. I encourage you to look at those. But the gist of it is, as long as you don't change it, as long as you provide it to everybody else and share it, it's okay to use. It's even okay to use in commercial applications, but you should consult the actual license agreement on the FFmpeg website to see what you have to do in order to use it in commercial applications. You're going to want to install Microsoft.extensions.configuration. This is so that you can include some options files, like getting information out of appsettings.json and putting that into an options C# class, serializing it. You're going to include system.drawing.common, and this is really just for the thumbnail portion, saving a bitmap. You'll see how that works soon. Now let's go to program.cs, and I'm going to show you the few things you need to do here. For the most part, this is just a run-of-the-mill MVC application, and everything in here is just straight out of the box. Let's just focus on the things that are different. You're still going to add controllers with views, but you're going to add this new line here, and I'll make this a little larger. Global FF options, which as you can see when I hover here, is from the FFmpeg core library, which means you have to do a using FFmpeg core. And we're going to configure it and tell it where your bin folder is. I recommend that you copy the FFmpeg files to the same folder where your project is. So you'll have your project folder and you'll have this, and they'll all be both underneath your solution folder. And give it a temporary folder where it can work on images. If you don't have this line, then it's going to say it can't find the 2 executables that come with FFmpeg, which is ffprobe, I believe, and FFmpeg. Okay? Now next up is the app settings. So if you've got some settings that you want to do, which if you're like me, I'll shoot over there real quick. I like to specify what the size of my thumbnail is going to be, and maybe how long of the blob that I'm going to use. You can put that kind of information under an app settings, create a C# class called app settings, and create a property for each one of the items that's in your app settings.json under the app settings level. And then go back to program.cs, and you can add those in here just like this. Services, which is actually builder.services. So builder.services.configure, then the name of the class that I just showed you once you've created it, then the place in the configuration file where you've got those settings underneath. So I put the parent one here. So configuration.get section app settings. Next up is your services. This is optional. If you want to put a crazy amount of logic in your controller, it's going to make for an ugly program. If not, you're going to want 1 or 2 services. I won't go into depth here, but I have lots of dependency injection in most of my videos, and if you pay attention just looking at the code here, you can probably figure it out. Just put your interface and your class name. The class has to implement that interface, and you have to either add scoped, or one of the other verbs here for doing dependency injection. I think it's add transient or add singleton, but add scope works well with this. It's once per request that it will instantiate that. The rest of this is out of the box. Now we're going to go to the controller and the view. Why don't we do the view first? I put all the logic in the index, and I've created a model called video upload. Now, actually, this anti-forgery token isn't implemented on the back end, but we could do that later. So really what's important here is we're doing a post request, and the encoding type is multi-part form data. That means we're going to upload a file. As you can see, here's the action verb post here. Next up, we've got a title from our model. It's in this div form group. That's just the Bootstrap CSS doing its job. But most importantly, this is what you're looking for here, which is we've got a iForm file, and we've got a label for and an editor for. I'm able to do the label for because if I go to this model, I've specified a display name, and it's just going to take that text and put it on the screen. Okay. And then I've got the results, which is a custom class of its own, and we'll see more of that when we get into the controller. We've got a submit button, which just submits that form. And then I've got our results here. The results is using the Bootstrap class, alert, alert success, alert, alert danger. Bootstrap comes when you, with it, if you do a file new project and pick MVC. If you want to pick something else, one of the other popular CSS classes out there, like there's quite a few to choose from. A lot of people like Material. Then you're going to have to include that CSS yourself and modify your layout.cshtml. I just did this because this is the easy way and it looks good. All right, let's go into the controller. If you go to the home controller, I've specified here a list of the extensions that we allow the user to use, and we're wanting to make it MP4, so if it's one of the ones other than MP4, we will convert it. We've put both of our services here. If you scroll down a little bit, let's go to our save picture method. That's the one that we're getting into. Okay? So, first things first, I set it to success true. If there's an error, I catch it and set it to success false and put the message in there. Then we've got those Bootstrap things to make it show up as I just showed you. Next up, the file control lets you pick as many files as you want. So you can either do a for loop, or you can just look at the first one, which would be index of 0 on model.file. I've got a comment here that lets you know that you could also look at the old school way, which is looking at the actual request from the context and just do .form.files. That gives you the same thing. Kind of a bonus. So here's where I'm checking that extension. This path requires system.io, but it's kind of implied here. But if you hover over it, look, system.io.path. Next up, we're calling the upload videos async method from the setup service. I broke mine out into two services. Might be a little overkill for this, but I did make a larger project and I just pulled the thumbnail code out of it. So that's why I did it, but you might still want to, because I'm sure the uploading your image isn't the only thing you're going to do in your app. I'm going to go to the concrete as opposed to the interface, and let's go to that method. Upload videos async. So here we're going to make sure that we've got at least one file, and we're going to go ahead and go to process the video on the image service. I've got a few helpful comments here. I might add some more before I put it on GitHub if it doesn't match exactly, but we will run it here so you can see how it works. In the image service, we're going to run the process video method. So here we're going to use the system.gwid to get a unique identifier and either put thumb or video on the string depending on what you want it to look like. The thumbnails are all going to be bitmaps. So we'll go ahead and build out those string names. Then we're going to create a file stream to save the video file first to the disk, because FFMPEG works off a local path. You may have a way to have it work directly off a stream, but I'm not aware of that. If you have that, you might want to put it in the comments for the other viewers, but it works well off a file, and you can always delete the file later with code. That's how I've done it. So next up, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the extensions, and we'll convert it to MP4 if we don't like it as is. So this portion is using the FFMPEG library, which is fantastic. We don't need to worry about it. We just specify the specific pieces we want, like what codec, and the other big piece here is the force format. We're forcing it to MP4 from something else. The rest of it, pick what you want. A lot of examples out there on the internet too for using this open source package. Alright, let's move on. One of the ways I like to get back to where I was is to go to find references and just click down here. It's a shortcut for me. I'm sure you've got better ways using these bookmarks up here. So now that we've converted it, there's some other things we can do with FFmpeg that might not be available with that library. What you can do is you can call the FFmpeg executables directly and specify a command line. I'll show you how that works. So assuming that you've saved it where I mentioned earlier, then you can specify the path to the FFmpeg executable, and then you can give it a specific command. So if you scroll down here a little bit, you can see that we're going to be using the Windows shell, etc., and we have to open and close and call a system process just like you would call anything else on your operating system that's an external application. So what's interesting here is we must pass in this input, telling it -I, and we've escaped out the squiggly 0. The squiggly 0 contains this file path. So what's interesting is that we have to pass the -I, and then we have to put in the file path. So it's just going to be ffmpeg.exe space -I, and then the file path to the video file. Okay? Now we've passed it in, and we got to give it, so the -I tells it we want to get the information from the video. It's going to dump out quite a bit more information than just the video length, and so we're specifically looking for this duration. So you can put a regex. There are other ways of obviously parsing strings. One of the ways that developers like to do that is using regular expressions. You can use the regex library for that, and you can look for duration. That's going to put it out into an array. You're going to grab the first and second pieces of it, and we can use them as time pieces to create a time span. Time span will give us the duration, and we can return that. I know getting the duration is not probably why you're here. I'm guessing you're here for the thumbnail, but that's what that is. As you can see, it's called a little differently than we called the thumbnail code. So moving on, here's the actual thumbnail code. In my case, I'm wanting to give the thumbnail a specific size. So when I got the duration information, we got the height and width. So I can come in here and we can apply that as a ratio. This is just kind of a simple math equation here that we're going to apply keep the same aspect ratio, but give the thumbnail a smaller size. So coming back here, we're ready to get the thumbnail. So we're going to call snapshot async, which again is part of that amazing library that we've got. And we're going to pass it in the file path, give it the size of the thumbnail that we want. And then this next part is interesting. If you just specify no, it's going to take a thumbnail from the very start of the video. But you might want to take the thumbnail from like 2 minutes in or 3 minutes in, and you can apply a time span there. That is an option. Just make sure you don't specify it outside the range of the video. If the video is too long, or I'm sorry, too short, then you could get an exception there. So the result of that is actually not something that you can just dump to a file. Instead, it's going to give you that image format BMP. And so what I like to do now is to go ahead and save it to a memory stream, giving it the type of bitmap. With the stream, you can always put the position back to 0 if you're not sure where it's at. And I don't know that it's necessary here because we just created that stream. But then after that, we can copy that memory stream to, say, a file stream that has a path as a target, file path. And we can do copy to async since we're in an async method. And it'll save that'll save it to the file. Everything else is just getting things back to the view. We made this nice result object here. This would work perfectly, say, if you had an entity framework class like this, to just save this to the database. But let's go back to our view now, because we're actually going to return this. Well, we'll go to the controller first and then the view. So we're going to come back to our controller, and if everything is successful, we're actually going to apply that class, that object I just showed you, to the results, which is part of the model on the index. So if I hit F12, here's the model, and it's putting that entire object into this results here. So then if I come back to the view, we can look at the model.results and look at the warning text, or we can just look at whether it's success or failure. So if I now hit play, we can go through and run this thing. I didn't do anything with this title other than pass it into the controller, but you might want to save it or use it as a file name or something. You can hit play here. I just have a breakpoint. And there you go. It should be saved. Go to your thumbnails folder. You should see an MP4 and a BMP file. Hope this helps you. Go ahead and take a look at the code. I'll post the link here shortly.